Okay, I've got a question for you. Have you ever been shopping for yogurt at the supermarket and been so overwhelmed by the variety that you couldn't actually decide on which one to buy? I'm a massive fan of yogurt. I think it's delicious, nutritious, and very versatile. But there's so much variety available that sometimes it can be quite difficult to decide which one to go for. There are three types of yogurt that dominate the market: natural yogurt, Greek yogurt, and Icelandic yogurt. When you think about Greek yogurt, you might think about Zeus sat atop Mount Olympus sipping the yogurt from a vase. But you may be surprised and a little bit disappointed to learn that Greek yogurt isn't called Greek yogurt because it's made in Greece, and actually it has very little to do with Greece. You may also be surprised that the apparent newcomer Icelandic yogurt, or Skyr as it's properly known as, has a history going back to over 1,000 years. Before we get any more confused, we need to look at how yogurt is actually made. Today on How It's Made. Yogurt. Humans have been making yogurt for about 5,000 years, maybe since the ancient Mesopotamians. It may have a number of different origins, but certainly it grew out of Asia. It actually only became popular in the Western diet since the mid-20th century. At its most simple, yogurt is just fermented milk. To achieve this fermentation, milk is usually, but not always, boiled and then cooled back down to around 37 degrees. It's then mixed with a certain blend of bacteria known as yogurt cultures or starter cultures, which kicks off the fermentation process. This bacteria converts the lactose in the milk into lactic acid. The lactic acid is what gives the yogurt its distinct taste, and it's also why people who are lactose intolerant can eat yogurt. Lactose intolerance is a massive issue in Asia, and hence probably why it's so popular over there. And that's basically all there is to making yogurt. The fundamental process that I've described is the same regardless of whether you're making natural yogurt, Greek yogurt, or Skyr, but obviously there are differences between the three yogurts. That's because during this fundamental process, there are certain variables that can be altered, which will influence the final product. The first variable is the milk. Which animal is it from? And what's the fat content? Is it full fat or is it skimmed? The second variable is whether or not it's boiled. If you boil the milk before you ferment it, it impacts the fat molecules and results in a thicker yogurt. Another reason you may want to consider boiling your milk is because it kills off any unwanted bacteria. Historically, this was done because most milk would be unsafe for drinking if you didn't. But these days, most milk is pasteurized and this step is a bit superfluous. There's probably very little risk of unwanted bacteria in your milk if you've bought it from a supermarket. The third variable is the specific blend of yogurt cultures. There are some bacteria that are essential to yogurt production in general, but then other yogurts add additional bacteria to give their distinct tastes. The fourth and final variable is whether or not it is strained and how long it is strained for. The yogurt can be filtered through a muslin or a pudding cloth to filter out the liquids or the acidic whey, leaving behind a thicker, more consistent yogurt. The more you strain the yogurt, the more you sort of blur the lines between yogurt and cheese. Strained yogurt in general is higher in protein and calories, but contains less calcium and is generally more expensive. It's more expensive because if you want to produce the same volume of strained yogurt as natural yogurt, you require more milk. You also have this byproduct, acidic whey, which is really expensive to get rid of, and a lot of dairy companies actually pay farmers to take it off their hands. This acidic whey is actually distinct from sweet whey, which is a byproduct of cheese production, and is a lot more valuable because that can be used in protein powders and the like. This acidic whey is not very nutritious, doesn't have much protein, and is basically useless. The more that you strain the yogurt, the more concentrated it becomes, the more nutritious it becomes, but the more expensive it becomes. And that's basically it. I mean, if that sounds pretty straightforward, it's because, well, it is. In fact, you can easily make yogurt at home. You don't even need the specific bacterias. All you need is milk and, well, more yogurt. To start, put some milk into a pan and bring it to a boil. Then, once it's boiled, let it cool down to around 37 degrees Celsius. Mix in a few tablespoons of whatever yogurt you've got, and then leave it at that temperature for a few hours to ferment. There's a few ways that you can keep it at that temperature. I stored mine in a coffee thermos, but you could also put the oven on a low temperature and leave it in there. As you can see from this chart, the only difference between the three yogurts is a few variables. Greek yogurt is just regular yogurt, but strained. So why on earth do we call it Greek yogurt? A more accurate name would be just strained yogurt, right? But because Fig, a Greek company, popularized the product in the United States, people started calling it Greek yogurt, and it's been referred to as Greek yogurt ever since. So sorry, no, Zeus was not sipping on yogurt atop Mount Olympus. Skyr is also just a strained yogurt. But while most yogurts are made from full fat milk, Skyr is made from skimmed milk and thus has a slightly different consistency. It also uses slightly different yogurt cultures. At any rate, the fundamental variables are the same for all three yogurts. And, as I already said, this fundamental process applies to all yogurt-based products. Ayran, kefir and lebne, they're all made in this same fundamental way. As you can see, the only difference between, say, natural yogurt and ayran and kefir is that they are not heated at the start and thus have a thinner consistency and, of course, the specific yogurt cultures that are used. On the other side of the spectrum, lebne is closer to Greek yogurt and Skyr, but it's actually strained even more, making it more like a cheese than a yogurt. Looking at this chart, in fact, it's quite remarkable how variable yogurt can be. From a runny drink to basically a solid cheese. It's insane to me how many products are derived from just milk. And we haven't even entered the proper world of cheese and cream and butter and milk from other animals, and well, it's a rabbit hole. So there you have it. That's the difference between natural yogurt, Greek yogurt and Skyr. But with those differences in mind, should you actually eat yogurt at all? And if so, which one should you actually eat? Nutritionally, well, all yogurt is good as far as I can tell. Yogurt is rich in probiotics. Probiotics are a friendly bacteria which aid in digestion, and yogurt has the benefit of being suitable for people with lactose intolerance due to that conversion to lactic acid that we already discussed. Yogurt is also rich in iodine, and of course, just like milk, yogurt is very rich in complete proteins. Plus, culinarily speaking, yogurt is very versatile. It can be used in raita, tzatziki, marinades, breakfast, the list goes on. So if protein is the main appeal, I'd say go for something like Greek yogurt or Skyr, which is higher in protein. But plain old natural yogurt contains more calcium, is lower in calories, which is good if you're looking to watch your figure, and is also cheaper. But to be honest, I think that all yogurt is a good source of nutrients and protein. It's just that the specific composition is going to depend on how it was processed. In my opinion, yogurt is a great addition to any diet. One aspect where yogurt may not be so good, however, is the environmental impact. Like I said, all yogurt is made from milk, whether from a cow, a goat, a sheep, or even a water buffalo. These animals have one thing in common: they are ruminants. That basically means that they have different chambers in their stomachs, which enables them to digest grass. Well, what's the problem with that? The ability to digest grass means that when they flatulate methane, which is a powerful greenhouse gas, around 84 times more powerful than carbon dioxide. So while dairy products have a lower carbon footprint than, say, meat, they still have a carbon footprint that's worth considering. Another environmental problem arises when we consider strained yogurts like Greek yogurt and Skyr. That acidic whey byproduct that we already talked about, it's really hard to dispose of. Some farmers are feeding it to their animals or using it as part of their fertilizer or using it actually to produce methane to create energy. But you can't dump this stuff in rivers or whatever because it starves the water of oxygen and thus kills the wildlife. Like I said, the dairy producers, they're literally paying farmers to take it off their hands. I think there's a serious gap in the market there, but more on that later. For now, weighing, no pun intended, the pros and cons of eating yogurt, I'll be keeping Greek yogurt in my diet. Whether or not you do the same is your decision to make. Thank you so much for watching this video. If you've learned something or have anything to say, please leave a comment in the description. Please consider subscribing for future updates, and if you enjoyed the video, give it a like. Until next time.